Okay. So, are the new Eximus changes impossible for a mid-tier player to deal with? Well, no. If you are a mid-tier player, and you have as much experience as I have, and know exactly how to build optimally for whatever gear you do happen to have access to, then yeah, sure, you could be fine. Unless you're not as good of a player as me, and you don't know how to build. I guess... Does that mean we just need to enforce a skill ceiling of if you aren't this fast with your reflexes, if you are not this good of a third-person shooter, then you can't play this game? If you are not smart enough to guess how to build your mods correctly, do you need to log off Warframe and get on reading guides so that you can maximize whatever mods you have? Do you have to play this game now with an Overframe tab open on the other side of your screen with a Wikipedia page to everything that you're using? Is that the goal? And let's say that got those players to my level that I just performed here in this mission. Oh man, work your ass off, and that's your reward. Is cheesing Eximus enemies in a stronghold mission? That's your reward for getting good. That's what you're working for here, right? That's what you want? Yeah, no, fuck that. If that was what my experience as a player was, I would just play a different game, because there's plenty of better games. Luckily for me, I guess, that's not my experience, because I played back before these changes, so I didn't have to go through them. So now I don't have to fight over them, and I can just ignore those parts of the content that I don't like. Can other players do that? No. Am I going to stop playing Warframe because of the Eximus changes? Probably not, because I'm in an entitled and privileged position where those changes don't affect me as a player. Is this good for Warframe? Do we want to go to bring shitty tactics like kiting in? Is it more fun to slowly run away from enemies while shooting clip after clip into them to take them down one by one than the mode of gameplay that we had without this? I don't think so. Is it fun getting ganked by 3 to 5 Eximus units? And then having to run away because your gear's just not good enough to fight enemies at the content level that you should be at? Not really. No. I am going to bring some experience in from outside of Warframe now. I used to GM Dungeons & Dragons. I did 3.5 edition D&D for a weekly game for almost 6 years. And over my career as a GM, there were times when I wanted to teach the players to do things other than combat. I wanted them to learn that sometimes they should run away from an encounter. You know what? Players don't run away from shit. They do not back down from encounters. If they see a challenge, they try to beat it, even if it's going to punish them. Now, if my entire campaign had been designed around encounters that the players were not supposed to fight, or that they were better off running away from, and that whenever they did go up against them, they could win, but at a punishing cost, that game wouldn't have lasted 6 years. I would not have been able to run that campaign for that long. No one would have wanted to come back. Is that what you want to bring to Warframe? Because I succeeded at all my goals here in this video. I set myself up to take on each of these challenges with mid-tier gear to see what kind of difficulty the players would experience in those areas. And I did prove that you absolutely can do all of that content with the gear that you would probably have around MRs like 12 to 14. You could do it. But I also did something that most players will never do. I ran away from anything that I couldn't fight. You're not going to convince the average Warframe player that they should run away from fights. And then, of course, there's the Eximus Stronghold, where I came into a situation where you can't run away anymore. You can't run away anymore. There's nowhere else to go. And what happened? Well, I just killed myself over and over until I succeeded, and I burned a bunch of consumables. You know, just throwing this out here, I don't think consumables, for the most part, I don't think that they add to the experience of Warframe. You know what consumables I do like? I really like the air support charge, like the one that has Ortis call in and unlock doors, and I really like the ciphers. You know why I like those too? Because they allow players to bypass an element of the game that not everyone is equally skilled at. Not everyone is capable of doing the stupid little hacking minigames. Some people really can't stand them and they get upset with them. Saying, okay, no problem, you don't have to do the hacking, you can spend some resources so that you can farm other content so that you don't have to play this content. Those are great. Health and energy pizzas and shield pizzas. When have I used those in the past? I've used them to cheese vaults in the void so that I can get drift mods. I used to use them when I was a very low-level player to make up the difference between my gear and the content I was going up against. Which, that is exactly what I did here. I specifically did use one pizza and a clem, and those are things that you would absolutely have at this point in the game. Does it feel good? Not especially. Those resources, yeah, players all have access to them, but in an ideal experience, in an ideal game, you shouldn't use any. The level of challenge that you are facing in any encounter should be such that the weapons and the Warframe that you brought are all you need to achieve your goals. You should win with the tools at your disposal. You get access to Spectres so that solo players who don't want to do co-op content have a Spectre that they can bring along and they can use those for things. Same with all the health and energy and shield pizzas. Are those fill-in gaps that players might not be able to do themselves. And they're kind of essential assets to the leveling experience. And then once you're at the top of the game, you can just exploit the hell out of them and use them for everything else to make anything else trivial too. I don't like doing that. I don't think the game is improved by using them. And I'm not the only one who feels that way, to an extent, because the health and shield and energy restores all have cooldowns in the Steel Path, because it was very obvious that those were an exploitative strategy. So, do you want to play Warframe in a world where you are exploiting every advantage so that you can... because dying is a resource. Energy restores are a resource. Spectres are a resource. Do you want to have to burn all of your resources all the time to advance? No, not really. I don't want to have to use 2 or 3 deaths per mission as part of my strategy to get through missions. That's not fun. Yes, I have access to them. So, what would I change? What would I change? Okay. I still really love the new visuals of the Eximus units. I think they're great. The overshield thing is interesting. I'm not opposed to them having an additional health field. I think that's a great way to distinguish them from other enemies, for sure. Status effects. why is viral the only status effect that really works on Eximus shields? Why viral? What's the reasoning for that? Why is only one damage type a good idea? That's the biggest issue I have with that. Their special abilities. Their special abilities are really cool. You know what else I really love about their abilities is that they have a mechanic that alerts you in advance of what's happening. You see the effect occurring somewhere, and you know that if you stay there, then you're going to get hit by it. That is great. That is beautiful. That is something that I want to see expanded throughout all of Warframe to teach people to be more aware of their environment and to make movement more important. So what's bad about the abilities? They don't need line of sight, so they can just cause these effects to happen somewhere within a radius around them. They don't need line of sight to you. They just sort of happen near you. They can shoot around corners. They can shoot behind cover. The behind cover thing, I'm kind of okay with. Like, if you're behind a box and they throw it behind the box, yeah, that's cool. That drives you out of cover and it forces you to change things and do things differently. But, like, I wasn't even in the room, and they were shooting, like, all the way into other rooms to hit me. That I'm not fine with. I want those abilities to have some level of line of sight requirement. It should not be pure line of sight, because if it was explicitly line of sight, then standing behind a box would ruin it. But there needs to be like a few degrees from that line of sight field where, like, okay, they can hit within that range. What else is wrong? The enemies that use the abilities, they need a casting animation. When an Eximus is throwing one of those powers, I want it to use its hands, make an animation so that I know he's casting that ability. So that if I'm zoomed in watching one of those Eximus units while I'm shooting, I see him do that, I am now alerted that there is a mechanic that I need to engage with. That'll make me go, oh shit. I'll drop my scope, and I'll look around, and I'll try to get out of the way. Right now, it's just a passive thing that happens near them because they're around. And that stops being an element of the Eximus units as an enemy, and starts being an environmental hazard. I don't want it to be an environmental hazard. I want it to be an enemy hazard. I want to have to work around them. I want to watch and respond to that enemy so that I can do something about it. Those are very minor changes, but those two things would hugely improve the impact and feel of those effects. Enemy frequency. In single player, when I'm going up against 3 or more Eximus units, you saw what happened. It was a shit show. It was bad. That's when you die. Some of that's kind of cool. It's neat coming up against all of a sudden. Oh, there was one bit in there where like one guy had a shield and there was like doing the fireball stuff, and like that was exciting, and it was an interesting way to lose. But for most players, getting overwhelmed like that is not going to be a positive experience. And more than 3 of them, that's just shitty luck. Maybe some kind of population cap that scales based off of how long you've been in the mission would be good. Like, if you're in a survival mission for like 40 minutes, by all means. But for the rest of the content, players should be able to get through the entire star chart, Sedna included, without having to go to the wiki and look up detailed guides about how best to build for specific amounts of viral damage so that they can overcome the difficulties they're having with Eximus enemies. Eximus enemies should not be so completely, radically different of a challenge for players compared to the other enemies that they're fighting in the same mission, that they have to rewrite the entire way that they approach the game. That's not great. So, up to 20 minutes or 20 waves in endless missions on the star chart from Sedna and below should just be accessible to middle tier players. They shouldn't have to do anything freaking weird or crazy to get this done. They shouldn't have to go far outside the game to learn this stuff. For everyone else that wants to get that into the details of the finer points of Warframe, sure, I do Zaramon content, I do Steel Path. That stuff is all there for us if we want to go that extra distance in the game and do all this other stuff. If you want to do hour-long survival missions or whatever crazy shit you want to do, yeah, no, that should be an option. What I think this argument has come down to, and I mentioned this in a comment on someone else's video, is that the real debate over the challenge level of Eximus enemies is partly players who have been in Warframe for years losing touch with the experience of leveling, losing touch with just how much you actually have to grind random crap to get through the different mastery ranks, and this sort of weird entitlement of, if you want to enjoy as much of the game as I enjoy, well, then you should have to put in the time just to do the basics. This Eximus enemy debate, to me, is the Warframe community trying to agree on where the kiddie table is that the casuals should have to stay at, and that they don't get to play the cool content unless they've proven how good they are. Fuck that. Fuck all of that. Alright, you want to have a designated kiddie table, and I've heard people point out, it's like, oh, it should be half of the star chart. No. No. Players should be able to make it all the way through the star chart, all the way through to Sedna, maybe even through those last few nodes in the Void, but I'm okay with the nodes in the Void being like an extra funky challenge. Like, they're already kind of a bastard. It's fine. Because the Void is its own kind of garbage. But letting players get through the star chart, through Sedna, let them have that full experience. Now, once they've gotten to that point, they're looking for new challenges. If they're still playing Warframe, which let's hope they are, if they've had a good experience up until now they've made it through the star chart, they have all their gear, they have all their mods, they feel all ready to, like, engage in some of this tougher shit. Now you have a player base that wants to learn gimmicks, wants to learn mechanics like that, and wants to min-max, and it's like, now that you have all this stuff, how can you make it better? How good can you get this to go? That's where you have players that want to engage with these sorts of problems. So let them get that far so that you can onboard them. That's the whole argument. Don't make it miserable for people to get to Sedna and finish Sedna. That's where I'm going to wrap up this video right now. This is mostly just covering the extensive recording that I did that was like, oh god, it was like 80 minutes. I don't want to think about it. But that covers my recap of all of that. And I have been very active in comments and responses to people right now, and there's a lot of feedback that I've been getting about things like, well, really, the Eximus enemies are supposed to be susceptible to void damage specifically, so you need to use your amps, and those will take them down. I'm like, I don't think that works as well as you think it does, but I'm going to go and check that stuff out too. I'm going to research all of that. My next video on this topic is either going to be a response to the feedback and advice that I've been given, or it's going to be advice to players who are stuck in the middle and have to deal with this content. It's going to be advice to those players on how to deal with it, or both of those topics will be one video, depending upon how long this all turns out to be. I will get back to you when I can get back to you, but that's that covers it. So thanks for listening.